You've probably seen this more times than you can remember. A bird drops into a bird bath, splashes around like it has no idea what it's doing, water flying everywhere. Then it suddenly stops, shakes off, and flies up to a nearby branch. And that's usually where you stop paying attention. It just blends into the background of the yard. One of those small, repeatable things you don't really question anymore. But if you slow down and actually watch what happens next, something interesting shows up. The bird doesn't just leave. It stays there for a while, almost still, carefully running its beak through every part of its feathers. It doesn't feel unusual at first, just routine. But then you start to wonder, why does it always do it like that, every single time, with the same pattern? And more importantly, what if the thing you thought was just a simple bath isn't really about cleaning at all? Most of us don't really question it. You see a bird splashing in water, and the explanation feels obvious. It's bathing. Just like we take a shower, it's probably just cleaning itself off before moving on with the day. Dirt comes off, feathers look better, everything resets. It's simple, and it makes sense on the surface. But that simple explanation quietly hides something you don't usually stop to think about. Because not everything in nature is doing what it seems to be doing at first glance. What looks like a basic hygiene routine might actually be something very different underneath. Something more precise. Something that has less to do with comfort and a lot more to do with survival. And the strange part is, once you start seeing it that way, it's hard to go back to how you used to think about it. That small moment in your yard suddenly doesn't feel so simple anymore. The truth is, it's not just a small correction to what you thought. It's a complete shift in meaning. Because bird bathing isn't really about cleaning in the way we usually imagine it. It's part of something much bigger happening right in front of you, even if you never noticed it. Every splash, every quick shake of the wings, even those quiet pauses afterward, they all fit into a larger process. The bird is running without stopping to think about it. What looks like a simple routine, or even something playful, is actually tied to keeping the bird alive in a very direct way. And the focus isn't dirt at all. It's something far more delicate. Something most people would never guess just by watching. It comes down to feathers, not just as decoration, but as a highly sensitive system that has to stay in perfect working condition. And when you start paying attention to that, the whole scene changes. You stop seeing a bird washing itself, and instead, you start noticing something closer to maintenance in real time. Like it's quietly checking and adjusting the one system it depends on every single day. A bird's feather is a lot more complex than it looks when you see it from a distance. It's not just a soft layer or something that simply keeps the bird warm. Each feather has a central shaft, and coming off that are hundreds of tiny branches. And even those branches connect through even smaller structures that lock together almost like a microscopic zipper. When everything is aligned the right way, the feather works perfectly. Air flows smoothly over the wing, warmth stays trapped close to the body, and water rolls right off without soaking in. But the moment those tiny connections start to separate, the system begins to break down. Flight becomes less efficient. The bird loses heat faster. Even simple movement takes more energy than it should. And the strange part is, this doesn't take anything dramatic. Just daily life is enough. Moving through branches, squeezing through tight spaces, sitting in crowded groups, even normal motion throughout the day. All of it slowly pulls those structures out of alignment. So what looks like a bird taking care of cleanliness is actually something much more precise. It's not about being clean at all. It's about keeping a very delicate system working the way it's supposed to. And once you see that, the whole behavior starts to feel completely different. When a bird drops into the water, something subtle happens that most people never notice. The feathers don't just get wet. They actually become softer, more flexible, and easier to work with. Not cleaner in the way we think about it, but more like they've been loosened up for adjustment. And that's when the next step starts. The bird begins preening. It runs its beak through its feathers slowly and carefully, section by section, almost like it's fixing something, piece by piece, instead of grooming itself. The important part is that the water alone isn't the goal. It's not the solution by itself. It's more like a reset phase. It sets the conditions so the real work can happen afterward. Without that step, the structure doesn't fall back into place as effectively. But with it, everything becomes easier to realign, almost like things are snapping back where they belong. So, when you look at it closely, what you're really seeing isn't simple hygiene. It's more like maintenance on a very delicate system, something that has to be reset properly, or it slowly stops working the way it should. But there's a moment in this whole process that most people never really think about. It comes right after the bird gets out of the water. In those first seconds, everything changes. Wet feathers don't work the same way. They're heavier, less responsive, and the bird can't take off as quickly or as cleanly as it normally would. Even the precise, controlled movements it relies on start to feel slightly off. And in nature, that small difference matters more than you'd expect. A predator doesn't need a perfect situation. It just needs a short window, a moment where things aren't working at full speed. So while the bird is sitting there, carefully preening, it's not really in a relaxed state. It's exposed, still, focused, and aware, in its own way, that it's not fully safe yet. It's a strange thing to think about. Something necessary for survival also creates a brief moment of risk, and it makes you wonder how often that trade-off exists in nature doing what has to be done, even when it leaves you vulnerable for a little while. If you watch closely, you'll start noticing something most people miss. Birds don't just jump into water and keep going without thinking. They pause, they lift their head, they look around, then they go back in again. It doesn't look like much at first, but it's not random at all. It's happening in real time, like a constant check-in with their surroundings. Because the bird is doing two things at once. On one side, it needs to maintain its feathers. That means bathing, preening, keeping everything in working condition. But on the other side, it can't ignore what's around it. It has to stay alert. It has to stay alive. And those two needs don't always line up perfectly. The more time it spends in the water, the more exposed it becomes. But if it cuts it short too early, the feathers don't get properly maintained. So what you're really seeing is a quiet balance. A back-and-forth decision happening in seconds. Continue a little more, or get out now. It's subtle, but it's always there, shaping every move the bird makes in the bath. Not all birds even rely on water to do this. If you've ever watched them on a dry patch of ground, you might have seen something that looks a little strange at first. A bird lowers itself into the dirt, starts rolling around, flicking dust up into its feathers, then suddenly shakes it all off like nothing happened. At first glance, it can look almost playful, like it's just enjoying the moment or messing around in the dust. But there's a very different reason behind it. This behavior is called dust bathing, and it serves a completely separate purpose from water bathing. It's not about cooling down or getting clean in the usual sense. It's about dealing with something much smaller and harder to remove: parasites, living inside the feather structure. Water alone can't always reach or affect them, but fine dry soil gets deep into the feathers and works in a different way. It disrupts those tiny organisms, weakens them, and makes it easier for the bird to remove them later during preening. So even without water, the goal stays the same. It's still about keeping the feather system working properly, just using a completely different method to get. After the bath is over, whether it's water or dust, you might think the bird is done. But that's not really the case. In fact, that's when another important part of the process begins. The bird goes back into preening, carefully working through its feathers again, section by section. But this time, there's something else involved beyond just straightening things out. At the base of its body, there's a small gland that produces natural oils. As the bird preens, it collects that oil and spreads it across its feathers in a slow, deliberate way. That coating does a lot more than people usually realize. It helps keep water from soaking in, protects the feathers from harmful microbes, and keeps them flexible so they don't break down over time. And in some cases, birds take it even further. They interact with things like ants, using the chemicals they produce as an extra layer of defense against parasites. When you put it all together, it stops looking like separate behaviors. It starts to feel like one connected system. Different steps, different tools, but all working toward the same goal: keeping the feathers in working condition so the bird can survive another day. When you step back and look at it all together, the whole thing starts to feel very different. What first looked like a simple moment in a bird bath turns out to be something much more coordinated, almost like a system running in the background, where behavior, biology, and instinct all work together in a way that feels surprisingly precise. And it makes you think about how easy it is to miss complexity just because something becomes familiar. When you see the same thing over and over, your mind stops questioning it. It just labels it and moves on. But nature doesn't really work in simple labels. Even the smallest actions usually have layers underneath them that you don't notice at first. And the more you look, the more you realize how much is actually happening in moments you once ignored. Now, when I see a bird bathing, it doesn't really feel like cleaning anymore. It feels more like maintenance, quiet, repeated, almost invisible work that keeps everything functioning in a world that's constantly working against it. And it leaves me with one simple thought. How many other ordinary things around us are doing something far more important than they appear